before I get going, I just want to, I'm a member of the Conservative Caucus up in Hartford, and our chairman, Mike Francis, here today. He's running, he's actually running for Congress in the second congressional district. We also have Dave Wilson is here. He's a state representative from Fishbein. And Mark Anderson is also here. Mark's here. We are all members of the Conservative Caucus, and I'm the vice chair. So I'm here to talk to you today about inspiring your neighbors and by being courageous. In November of 2019, I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. to attend a convention of conservative and libertarian lawyers. The group is known as FedSoc. And it just happened to be the same week that the first round of impeachment proceedings was starting in Washington. And while it was interesting just because of that, it was an awesome week. The first night, we got to hear from Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. It was the first public appearance that he had made since his exoneration of a confirmation hearing. And it was basically one big thank you for an hour and a half. The next night, Attorney General William Barr addressed us, and he talked about impeachment and what was going on mere miles away from that site. And the next night, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch spoke to us in a fireside chat sort of situation. And at the end of Justice Gorsuch's talk, he spoke of current times. And he shared that he knew it was difficult to be a conservative these days. He reflected upon the tenacity of our founders and left us with these two words, very fitting for today. He said, "Be courageous." Those two words from that smart man have motivated me over the last 2 years, where not just as a politician, but also as a lawyer. Myself and Doug Dubitsky, Doug's also known as the Conservative Caucus, are the only lawyers in the state of Connecticut that have defeated this governor, not just in federal court, under the Second Amendment, where we found the governor to be unconstitutional as his executive orders. He repealed his executive orders as a result of that. We beat him in state court just a couple weeks ago, where the state court said that what the governor's been doing over the last 7 months or so is unconstitutional. And as a result of that, on Thursday, the legislature reconvened and voted to retake its place as a third branch of our government. And we also defeated Governor Lamont. We challenged the travel ban and found that the application of that during the first period of time was illegal. And we represented Audrey Hussey, who was fined $2,000, and ultimately those fines were vacated. In fact, after the hearing that we had in that case, the governor realized that what he wrote in his executive order could not be legal, and he modified that executive order. Only lawyers in the whole state of Connecticut. You asked, what is being courageous? Once there's a little girl who desperately needed an emergency blood transfusion to save her life. She'd gotten very pale, and her only chance of surviving would be to get a transfusion from her younger brother, who had miraculously overcome the same disease she had, and therefore had antibodies in his blood that were needed to fight the illness. The doctor explained to the little boy that it would save his sister's life if he were to give her his blood. The boy hesitated for a moment before agreeing to give this blood if it would help his sister. But at the age of 5, this was scary, but he would do anything to save his big sister's life. As the blood transfusion was happening, he lay next to his sister in the hospital. and was overcome with happiness when he saw the color come back to her face. He looked up at the doctor and he quietly asked, "When will I start to die?" The boy assumed that he was giving his life for his sister. He wanted to see her survive. That is courage. So how do you be courageous? I have some rules for you. First of all, loosen your limiting beliefs. When walking to an elephant camp, a man noticed that the elephants were only secured by a small rope that was tied around one ankle. He wondered why the elephants didn't break free from the rope, as the elephants were certainly strong enough to do so. He asked the trainer why the elephants didn't try to break free, and the trainer responded by saying that they use the same size rope when the elephants are little, when they're babies. Because when they're small, they can't break that rope. As they get older, they assume that they still can't break that rope. Remember that, and loosen your limiting beliefs. Rule number 2, listen to those you trust, not the naysayers. A group of frogs was hopping through the forest when 2 of them accidentally hopped into a deep pit. The other frogs stood around the pit, seeing how deep it was, and they told the 2 frogs that they couldn't help them. There was no hope. However, fighting for their lives, the 2 frogs ignored the others and started trying to jump out of the pit. The frogs at the top continued to tell the frogs in the pit to give up, as there was no way they'd be able to jump out. After trying over and over, one of the frogs listened to the others and gave up, accepting his fate and falling to his death. But the other frog continued to jump with all his might. The crowd of frogs yelled down to the pit that there was no hope, just stop. But the frog jumped even harder and persisted until he finally got out. Upon reaching the top, the other frog said, "We thought there was no way that any frog could ever jump that high. Couldn't you hear us?" The frog then signaled to the others that he was deaf. Oh. And he thought that they were encouraging him the whole time. So listen to those you trust, not the naysayers. My third rule is take responsibility for your actions. One night, 4 college students stayed up late partying, even though they had a test the next day. The next morning, they came up with a plan to get out of having to take their test. Each student rolled around in the dirt and then went to the teacher's office. They told the teacher they had gotten a flat tire the night before, and they spent the entire night pushing their car back to campus. The teacher listened, and to the students' delight, he offered a retest 3 days later. On the day of the test, the students went to the teacher's office. The teacher put all 4 students in separate rooms to take the test. The students were okay with that because they had studied. They were ready. There was 2 questions on the test. First question, what is your name? Second question, which tire was flat? Front right, front left, back right, or back? Take responsibility for your actions. The fourth rule, the fourth rule, in the 1940s, my fourth rule, never give up. In the 1940s, there was a man who at the age of 65 was living off $99 Social Security checks in a small house, driving a beat-up car. He decided it was time to make a change. So he thought about what he had to offer that other people would benefit from. His mind went to his fried chicken recipe, which his friends and family loved. He left his home state in Kentucky and traveled throughout the country, trying to sell his recipe to restaurants. He even offered the recipe for free, asking for only a small chunk of the money that was earned. However, most of the restaurants declined his offer. In fact, 1,009 restaurants declined his offer. But even after all the rejection, he persisted. He believed in himself and his chicken recipe. And when he visited restaurant 1010, they said yes. His name? Colonel Harlan Sanders. Never give up. Rule number 5, there is no time like the present. 2 sunflower seeds were lying side by side on fertile soil. The first seed said, "I want to grow up. I want to put down roots deep into the ground and sprout from the ground. I dream to blossom in delicate buds and proclaim the coming of spring. I want to feel the warm rays of the sun And the dewdrops on my petals, that seed grew up and became a beautiful sunflower. The second seed said, I'm afraid. If I put down my roots into the ground, I don't know what I will face there. If I grow tender stems, they can be damaged by the wind. If I grow flowers, they may be disrupted. So I'd rather wait for a safer time. Thus the second seed waited until a sparrow swooped down, grabbing the seed in its beak. There's no time like the present. And last but not least, rule number 6. Sometimes when you're courageous, miracles happen. When I was 13, my parents got divorced. My mother was represented by a lawyer named Vincent McManus. He was known for being a fierce lawyer, intelligent litigator. Vinny had a booming voice and a very quick wit. Most were intimidated by him. I remembered Attorney McManus prepping me for testimony during my parents' divorce trial, and I became inspired as a youth. That interaction together with my father, and I eventually too became a lawyer. In the mid-2000s, after I passed the bar, I was quite honored to have a case against Attorney McManus. And I remember the first time he called me, disappointed that my client was unwilling to settle that case. It was a brief conversation in which he told me in a booming voice, in no uncertain terms, what the court would do to my client, followed by a string of expletives, followed by him abruptly hanging up the phone on me. I never got a word in. I sat there in disbelief for a moment, and I called him right back. I told him what the court would do to his client. Rattled off a few of my own expletives and hung up the phone on him. A few days later, he faxed me a settlement agreement that was a lot more advantageous to my client, and eventually we were able to resolve that matter. It was with that exchange that I gained, I think, his respect. It was also during that case that I explained to him my motivation for becoming a lawyer, and he beamed with pride. You know, another quick story about Vinny, and this all comes together at the end. A few years later, we were on opposite sides of the case once again. This time, his client was in the wrong. I was trying to settle the case under terms that my client would like. And I would call, and he wouldn't answer the phone. So, realizing that he was more than likely at his office, I took out a bunch of paper, and I wrote on individual pages to fax to him, P-I-C-K-U-P-T-H-E-P-H-O-N-E, pick up the phone. And I faxed each individual page to him. Sometime later, I heard the fax machine going and went to retrieve the papers, and what came out was individual pages, all with a letter, N-O-T-O-N-Y-O-U-R-L-I-F-E, not on your life, right? It took a while, but we were able to settle that case as well. You know, I could go on and on about Attorney McManus and I. Over the years, you know, I represented him. We were co-counsel. We had cases against each other. When I got involved in politics, Vinny was always there. Always supportive, one of my best cheerleaders, always, you know, giving money to my campaign. Vinny passed away last May. And when I started that campaign and we got through the summer, I had an empty feeling, and I didn't realize it until we got to like fall what it was, just because Vinny wasn't there. And prior to Election Day, I got a call from the Native Bar Association. And they asked me to give a memorial for Vinny. You know, anyway. And I agreed to do that, and it was scheduled for November 5, 2 days after Election Day. And as you may know, on Election Day, it was announced that I lost by like 600 votes. I went to the Capitol, I emptied my office, I gifted my coffee maker, my couch. My wife went and got new health insurance. I was not in a good state. That was November 4. November 5 in the morning, I'm scheduled to do this memorial. And I first had a thought, you know, do I have the courage to do this? And I looked back at our interaction and my motivations, and I said, you know, it doesn't matter, you're going to go do it. people say about the loss, and I did. And that's a clock. We'll let Ann tell the rest of the story. And a few days later, it was announced that I won. So, miracles do happen.